Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us here today. Um, Welcome to the Westchester Multicultural Chamber. As some of you may know what our mission and our vision is, our goal, we are here to provide resources for small businesses. Too many times, businesses or business owners forget that when you're starting out, when you just have an idea, when you're new, you know what you know, you may know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know. So we are here to provide you with the information that a small business would need so they can build on a solid platform and sustain and grow strong so they can expand in their communities, and strengthen the worth of their communities or the wealth of their communities also. So with that, I will pass it over to my good friend and one of the best advertising, marketing persons I know, who is very unselfish with her knowledge and her support. Again, copy and art, Elena Rivera-Cheek, one of the best there is.
Thank you so much, Charlene. And it's a pleasure to be here. Kudos to the Westchester Multicultural Chamber. My name is Elena Rivera-Cheek. I'm the Chief Creative Officer and founder of Copy and Art. Copy and Art is a digital marketing company based out of White Plains, New York. So, we're the corporate sponsor for this series and this event today. We're happy to be in that position. I think we have a wonderful morning planned for you guys. I think we'd like to keep it engaging and engaged, not casual, but definitely informal. The extent to which you have questions, just raise your hand. I know this panel is eager to add value to you. So without further ado, as a sponsor for the event, we get a 1-minute commercial. I'm gonna spare you my promo video, although I do have one. Instead, I'm bringing my Britney Spears mic, and I am going to have a great time with you today. Information changes situations. One of the cool connections I have to one of the panel members is that he's and I'll tee him up, but he was actually my attorney as I started Copy and Art 11 years ago, and is still my attorney. But he drafted my first subcontractor agreement, which is one of the most basic things you can do as an attorney for a company, and has been with me for the 11 years. So I know this panel is strong and here to help. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. We have a couple of topics they'd love to talk to you about, but more importantly, any questions you have, certainly raise your hand. We'll bring a mic over to you, and we'll see if we can help you out in any way possible. All right, so we have Naeem Hussein, who's a CPA, ADS Business Management Services, Account and Bookkeeping. He's going to introduce himself. Doug Trokey, who's a partner at McCarthy Finger here in Westchester, and Gary Solomon, who's a vice president of small business lending for Tompkins Bank. So thank you for being here, guys. Do you want to introduce yourself, Naeem?
Sure. Morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and my first in-person meeting in 2 years. Naeem Hussein. I've been an accountant for over 10 years, CPA for about 3 years. I concentrate right now on taxes, and I work closely with small businesses and individuals. That's my specialty, and I look forward to answering some of your questions later. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Doug Trokey. I'm a partner at McCarthy Finger here in White Plains. I'm a business attorney, for lack of a better term. I'm a general business practitioner. I handle small businesses to mid-size level businesses, and I handle everything from the formation of an entity all the way through to its dissolution, all the contracts and documents in between, leases, and any type of transaction.
Okay, good morning all. Gary Solomon with Tompkins Mahopac Bank. We are also a corporate sponsor, and I'm very happy to be here and look forward to what this chamber can bring together and having equality for all of our business owners. I actually run our small business lending department, so I am somebody that you would definitely want to speak to and can talk about what the bank looks for when we decide to lend money to a business to help them grow. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So as I said, we're going to kind of keep it informal. We have a couple of questions that we, as an organization, would want to make sure that we hit. But if there are any questions on initial kind of getting to know who is here, anybody have a question for any of the panel? Because I have one. Go for it.
Hi everyone, my name is Rochelle Samuels. I'm an interior designer and I'm a solopreneur. So every time I hear the word small business, this is probably the most basic question. How do you actually define it? Is it one individual or is it like more than 5 employees?
That's a really good question. Yeah, very, very good question. The way Tompkins would qualify a small business would be the size of the employees, probably 300 or less, revenue of under a certain dollar amount, maybe $2 million, and loan amounts under $750,000. So that's how we would qualify a small business.
My answer? Okay, so the IRS, less than 300 employees right now, 500 million or less revenue, but in our setting, I would say if you're making less than 20 million gross, you're a small business.
And from a legal point, mine is more of a general. It's based on size and income, but I would say that from a legal point of view, depending on what you do, some industries require a lot more legal services than others, and some individuals value the services more than others. So, but solo up, it's different things to different people, really. So.
Oh, and just one more thing I want to add. I personally consider a small business whatever you feel is comfortable for you, because I know businesses that do like 500-600 million, but then their cost of goods sold is about $1 million short, so the net's only a couple $100,000. So you can be $1 million business, your net's 900, or a $500-600 million business and your net's 100,000. So which is the small business? We don't know. So it's whatever you define yourself, I would say is a better answer.
Well, and isn't that a great intro? Because part of what we want to talk about today are the 3 main topics that can knock out a small business. I represent marketing, even though I'm a moderator. If you have questions around marketing, digital marketing, social media, I'm here for all of that. But then cash flow, legal, lending, all of these topics that are important to businesses, these are some of the main key factors that can jam up a business as it's growing from, one solopreneur to, a $300 million company. So I'm going to kick it off with another question. As we're starting a business, Doug, and for someone here that's either starting a business or they're in their, let's say, in the initial stages of business, what are some of the important legal kind of things they should, maybe they have a limited budget, maybe they can't afford a big firm with a big retainer, but what are the main things we should be thinking about from a legal perspective?
Okay, the first thing I think everybody addresses is you want to open a business. How do you do business? You can do business in several different forms. You could simply hang out a shingle or post something digitally nowadays, in which case you'd be acting as a sole proprietor. In that case, there's no legal protections. It's just you. If anything goes wrong, they sue you. The other 2 most popular forms of business entities are LLCs, limited liability companies, and corporations. Corporations have been around since the 1600s in England. They're very well established. There's a whole body of law regarding them. And then LLCs have come about in the last 30 years or so, not as much. So for most people, regardless of whether you're one or more, I would strongly suggest that you do not do business without a corporate entity or an LLC, it offers a lot of protection to you. So you then come down to a choice. Well, do I do an LLC or do I do a corporation? And these days, I think LLCs are the most common because they're the most flexible. They could be anything you want, and even more important, they don't require corporate formalities. Now, what is a corporate formality? I'll be very quick. That's like having a board meeting every year, an annual meeting. Under the law, you're supposed to do that every year. What I can tell you is I've had clients come in after 17 years in business with their corporate minute book still in wrappers. They've never had a meeting. They've never appointed officers. And if you don't do that, you can potentially open yourself to liability because you're not exercising these formalities, which separates you. So what I'd like to kick off, so those are your basic three things. Sole proprietorship or partnership, which is the same, just with more than one person. There's no protection. LLC or corporation. The next consideration really are tax considerations when you're doing that.
Well, and
I'm gonna
also opening up a bank account, right? Because one of the first things we
Correct.
did was we went
Correct.
to the bank and we said, hey, Bank of Copy and Art, we want to open up a business account. And they said they needed a couple of things,
Right.
more formal things.
Okay, well, in that regard, that would be to forming an entity. First, I just want to briefly touch on the tax issues that will inform your decision on what to do, and then we'll get to the opening the bank account.
All right, so for tax purposes, I actually prefer LLCs also. Many people love S corporations, so when somebody comes to me and says, I want to open up a business, I have a few questions. What kind of income are you going to have? How much income are you going to have? What's the bottom line? And then we do an analysis of where you're going to be in 5 years and which structure will be better. And the other thing is where you're located. S corps are great, but in New York City, they have a corporate tax. So if people are running away from self-employment tax, New York City hits you for 9%, so you're only saving about 2 or 3%. So what I always tell people is let's start off with an LLC. The initial setup is more, but it gives you the flexibility. Let's say 3 years down the line, you start making a lot of money, and we determine the S structure is better. We just file an election and start filing S corp taxes. And in the beginning, LLCs have lower maintenance, like Doug mentioned. They're so easy to just operate, and they, Doug will take care of the liability section on that, and that's it.
Can you just explain what an S corp is? Because I don't know
Yes.
that everybody.
So an S corporation is basically a regular corporation, but for tax purposes, you're exempt from federal taxes, and New York State has a fixed fee based on revenue, not the bottom line. So you just avoid the double taxation. Okay, and C corps, I don't care if the new tax rate is 21%, it's still double taxation. So it's your regular income tax plus another 21%. That was a question that was asked a lot in 2018. Okay.
So as we can see, some of this can get complex. Some of it can get, depending on what the nature of your business is, it might not be your cup of tea. So one piece of advice I'll give just from a business-to-business standpoint is hire experts as soon as you can. That'll support you in areas where, like Doug talked, and some of my brain didn't know what he was talking about. And I've been working with him for 12 years. So you want to make sure that this is why a forum like this is great. Partner with the people who can support you in those areas that are very complex, like we're going to talk a little about cash flow, Gary, what you want to talk about on lending, but just also knowing, who we can turn to when we have questions like that.
Yeah.
Do you want a mic?
She's got a built-in mic.
I'm sorry I missed whatever happened.
Shame. Don't invite your family anywhere. Anyway, question. Elena mentioned that in order to really build a solid platform, solid foundation, you need to hire the professionals, right? To engage the professionals. Most of the times when you're starting out, capital is a problem.
Sure.
Or you don't have that cash flow. So what are some of the suggestions that someone can do so they can surround themselves with individuals that can answer the questions for them?
I mean, you were looking at me, so I'm going to answer. I think joining a chamber like this is the first step, because you don't have to hire us to get the benefit of our collective experience. You don't need to have a $200,000 retainer with McCarthy Finger or Copy and Art in order to get the benefit of advice. So first, start where the people with the information and the right heart are, and a lot of them seem to be in this room. So I think that's a really good start. There are plenty of resources out there, so that's not really the biggest thing. I think when I didn't have any employees and called Doug for the first agreement, it was, I thought to myself, I need help. I can't afford to hire an employee yet, but I am going to have this person who's going to learn about my business. What if they try to take what they learned and do something? I'd want to have some recourse. So I begged him to take me with very little bit of a retainer. He must have seen something in me, because he was able to support me so that as I brought somebody in, not as an employee, couldn't pay those taxes, couldn't pay that payroll at that time, I had protection that anybody I brought in wouldn't take our secrets and go do something that they shouldn't with them. So I would say, you know, and we're going to talk about cash flow, which is also really important, even though I'm digital marketing, because learning how to manage whatever money comes in is hyper critical for any business of any size. But for small businesses, it might mean life or death. So just making sure that you're doing the best you can with whatever you are able to earn as revenue through your business.
Yeah, that's a really good point about getting the equity needed to start up a business. Banks are going to look for at least 2 years worth of historical data or tax returns before they do any type of lending. That's typically. But to find that startup money, it'd be great if you considered using your equity in your home, getting money from friends. There are organizations out there, non-for-profit, that do lend money to start up businesses as long as you have a solid business plan and you can show how that you have experience in what you're doing. They will lend you money. So if I can put some of that out there for you, I can give you some names. I can put it on our website for you. There are organizations out there. The SBA does a great program too with providing some capital out there. So if you go to the SBA.gov, you'll see some links and some resources out there to get money. One of the things I did wanted to touch back on about when you are starting up your business, one of the things to consider is if you're taking on a partner, think about who that partner is going to be. The bank will look for each partner that has at least 15% or more typically to personally guarantee any loan that's given. So you may want to consider who that person is, if they're strong enough to be considered for the loan, and what they bring and what value they bring to your business and what role they're going to play.
Great, Doug. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add something. I have a few tips. One is don't be rich in receivables, and don't be rich in your liabilities either. So I have a business, small. They have a $22 million receivable during the pandemic, and the chance of them collecting is very low. So I always tell people in the beginning, be a cash-based business. The only cash you have is the one that you have in your hand, and that's it.
So what that means, translation, is don't hold what people owe you too long. So rich in receivables means a lot of people are supposed to give me money or pay the invoices we've sent out, but they're not paying. That's a receivable, right? So you want to make sure that if you're throwing an invoice out there, that you're collecting on that as quickly as possible. What most business practice would also teach you is to pay out as slowly as possible and to receive in as quickly as possible. Now you have to determine for Copy and Art, that's not from a heart perspective the way we do business with our partners and vendors, but that's what business practice would tell you. So if you owe something, you pay slow, and if you're to receive something, am I wrong? No, that's what they teach you. I know. I had to learn a lot of this. And then you have to just decide, is that right for your business? Awesome.
I guess this would be for you, Gary. So what if I wanted to go the approach of
good question. The venture capitalists will probably look to take some sort of annual payment from your profits. If you can handle that, and having someone involved in your business, maybe on a day-to-day basis, that may be something that you can handle and definitely go for. Going to a bank, we're really going to be more hands-off. We'll give you the money, tell you to go with it, and then just make sure you pay us back on time. And we won't be involved in your day-to-day business. So that's the difference between the two.
So there might be an added value then going the VC route if you needed that kind of expertise.
Depends on if they actually have experience in what your industry is. It could be somebody that does not. They're just looking to get the money back from you. And if you're not producing, now they're going to be involved in every aspect of what you do.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, Gary's absolutely right. And to give you an example, I actually have a friend who's in the tech field who's been very successful, but he's dealt with VCs. And on his last venture, he likened every board meeting to hours of torture, because they would come in there and they are not concerned with your company. They are not concerned with your vision. Their only concern is making as much money as possible in whatever way they can. And if they have to sell you down the river or cut your legs out under you, they will in a heartbeat. So that's the devil you're dealing with. Now, that's not to say that there aren't venture capitalists who get involved in the company, but they're really not. That's more of an investor, where you get in talent who invests in you and nurtures you, and that could be a good situation. But you really have to be careful. I also wanted to just quickly talk to one thing Gary said about know who your partners are, just so everyone is aware. When you break up a business and the partners, it's called a business divorce. And just like a regular divorce, it is usually bitter and very, very painful. So you really do want to be careful who you go into business, not just from their financial background, but is it someone you can work with? Because if it isn't, it gets very messy.
I would say there's another way to approach business and cash flow, and it's the way that Copy and Art grew over 11 years. And I mean, listen, there's a time for funding, there's a time for looking to a bank for a loan, but if you heard Gary right, what he said was that a bank wants to see that you've been successful, or what your cash flow or what your finances have been for 2 to 3 years. What do you do for 2 to 3 years when you're getting started? So I think there's another conversation here, which to me is the most exciting, because I didn't build Copy and Art on debt. We built it on success and on smarts and on learning how to manage whatever dollars came through the door, because debt makes me want to cry. Even as a business owner now, and to grow, we've had to take on debt. So debt, there's a time and a place for everything. But there is a time and a place for also managing a business off your own success and being cash flow positive and kind of growing from your own success. So if we could transition the conversation a little bit to cash flow management, how do we manage the money that comes in? Those first 2 to 3 years that are mission critical for a business to be able to go to Gary and say, hey, I need a loan, we're expanding. But first he needs to see that you've done some good work. What advice do you have for the audience?
Okay, so the most common problem I see is people create new positions. They see like a Fortune 500 has a position, so they're like, oh, I'm making a lot of money, so I need to have an assistant, or I need somebody to do this task. They're very simple task, and now you're paying somebody $30,000, $40,000, even $50,000. So that's out the door. So I always tell people, in the beginning, if anything you can do yourself, do it to save the cash. Don't forget about Uncle Sam, okay? And be careful of what your personal expenses that you're charging to the business. A lot of people will say, oh, you're telling me I made $100,000, but I have nothing in the bank. Where did it all go? And then I'll say, well, you paid your mortgage, you paid this, you paid that, and that's where it went, because they don't see it. So I always tell them, keep your personal activity separate. If you need money for your personal, take it and transfer to your personal side, and this way you can see the money going out. But don't create unnecessary positions. That's a big cash flow drain.
Right.
Hold on, let's get a mic. to
Sonia,
you.
here's the mic.
Well, also, when the business is growing, like if we are planning to grow the business, let's say we have 4 teams and we decided to add another team. If we decide to add another team, if the team is creating, for say something, $200,000 a year, before we even decide to create another team, we have to make sure that we have a credit line that is a little bit bigger, because another team means that the invoices are going to come a little bit later, and we have to pay 2 more employees or something like that. And so you will have to pay more employees, and then if the invoices take a little bit longer, then you can have a problem. So before creating more jobs, that of course is great, but there will be a lapse when you are going to receive more payment. It's better to make sure that you have the loan in place.
Yeah, that's actually the perfect use for a credit line, is to pay for those expenses now when you know you have those receivables coming down the road. So that's the exact perfect use for a receivable. I just want to talk back a little bit about a new business and what are we doing with that cash flow. If I can impress anything, it's just reinvest, reinvest, reinvest back into your business. You can be very successful year 1, year 2, but if you're taking those profits, those net profits out, and you're not reinvesting it, you're living a lifestyle, you're buying that home and not putting it back into your business and then going to the bank for a loan, it's very difficult to prove how you can maintain that if you're not showing that you're putting money back into the business.
I would just add that one of the main things, even before you do anything else, is if you're going into business, you need a business plan, which any bank is going to require that you show them, and that business plan really is going to deal with budgeting as well. So you need to understand what are your costs going to be and what is your income going to be, and that's where you get into financing potentially, because you need to be able to pay for things initially. You need consultants. You don't need an attorney on retainer, but you should be consulting an attorney when you form a business and when you do your initial documents. You should be retaining an accountant to help you set up your business so it's set up properly and you're filing the necessary things. And if you don't have a lot of cash, maybe you kind of skip along the way and not rely on these experts as much as other people would. But certainly to start a business, you need to do it right, and you need that cash. So when you do your business plan, you say, okay, how much am I going to allot to starting a business? I had a business come in, and they're interested in getting into cannabis, which is a very big area now. But I asked them, how much are you allotting towards the business, creating this business? And they said, well, we think about $75,000. Now, I happen to know it's probably somewhere in the area of $250,000 to $500,000 if you're going to start a dispensary in New York. By the way, there are no regulations. You can't do it now. But we're anticipating. But the key is to have realistic understanding of your costs and what you're going to be making, and go forward on that. And if you don't have the financing, it's probably going to be a losing venture.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is a free tutorial on building that financial projection plan or business plan on the SBA website, sba.gov. I keep repeating that website. It's a really awesome website. They have online classes that are free, and they also have templates that you can use, and I really recommend you take a look at that site.
Also, one recommendation I do with my clients is I try to tell them to figure out your monthly cost and then set a goal to save at least 6 months of cash and just leave it in the account and don't touch it. This way you will never have a cash crunch, if somebody's not paying you, and you will sleep better at night. So, you figure out, hey, it's 10,000, so slowly chip away, put away 5,000, 1,000 a year, and get to that $60,000 goal. I guarantee you will sleep a lot better.
So there's a little bit of controversy these days about whether people need a business plan to start a business, or even if you're already in business, whether you need a business plan. I'm going to argue that you should go through the process of doing the work. I'll give you a funny anecdotal story. I was in my MBA program, and part of the entrepreneurship course was I was going to start a business. This is before Copying Art. And the business I started was an ad agency called El Morro Communications. And it was an ad agency that did healthcare marketing to Latino populations across the country. That was my business plan. And my professor looked at me and said, Elena, where is El Morro going to be housed year one? And I said, oh, I'm so happy you asked. We're going to be in a brownstone in Manhattan. And he said, where? I said, a brownstone in Manhattan. And because, it's marketing and optics. He's like, is it? He's like, how much is your brownstone in rent a month? And I said, I don't know. And he's like, okay, I'll see you next week. And I want you to tell me if you still live in a brownstone. And I said, of course. And of course I went and I had to call real estate agents in Manhattan to see how much it would be to rent my brownstone. And this was many, many years ago. I won't age myself, but many years ago. And I got back to class the next week and he said, so Elena, where's El Morro Communications going to be based? And I was like, probably my attic. And he's like, why is that? I was like, well, because the brownstone to rent one floor was $33,000 a month. And he goes, well, probably benefits you to know that, right? And that's how we teed up a business plan. Sometimes our dreams and our visions are great, and now we could maybe even move into a brownstone, and we wouldn't, right, because we like Westchester. But the point is, going through the process of drafting the business plan made it clear where we would start years 1 to 3, which, for the record, was in a basement and not in an attic in my case, but it was the truth that that's where I had to start. And going through the business plan process and knowing how much electric is, what's your first employee, how much are employee taxes, what do I have to save for the government? All of that can be life or death for a business. It's not sexy and it might seem a little scary, but if you can kind of wrap your head around it and become an expert and obsessed with your own business and your own success, you can figure it out. Any other questions from the audience? We got a great panel here.
This tax season, no questions?
If you were to do, from 1 to 10 in the order that a person that wants to start a business should proceed, what would it be that order from beginning to end? In terms of an idea, like if I have an idea of a business, from 8 to 10, what are the steps that I should take?
Well,
Yeah, we're going to need you to repeat that just because our cameras back there couldn't hear. Okay. So the question was, in order of 1 to 10, what should people be doing, like first, if they're thinking about starting a business? Do you want to aim that at somebody?
Like, for example, I have had an idea of doing a cleaning services for the longest time, and I struggled with the process of what is the process from beginning to end. I know that every business is different.
Sure.
But like, let's use that as an example. I hear a lot of discussion of very large numbers, but my thought is to start small and build from there. So what would be your recommendation, starting with in a smaller mentality, thinking big in the future, but starting small, from 1 to 10, what are the steps that I should be taking?
Can I take just a name at that since I'm an entrepreneur? I'm of the side hustle mentality. Personally, there are going to be people who say, get a lot of people on board, collect your money, crowdsource, ask your mama, go to the bank, and I'm going to tell you what might make sense is keep what you're doing as a day job and start to hustle on the side. and start to get one person, start to get one business idea. That's what I did. I consulted and I built the business on the side because I didn't want to struggle financially, but that also teaches you for what owning a business is actually going to be, which is you can pick any 14 hours a day you want to work. It's not easy. So having to hold a full-time job plus start a side hustle is what they call it now, the young kids, I think. That to me is the way to go because I wanted to worry about one thing, and it was starting my business. I didn't want to have to worry about the fact that I took a loan and I owed somebody money because that puts pressure and stress. So the stress I had was keeping my full-time job and having another job on the side. But that's a proof of concept that teaches you about the work ethic it's going to take. And then at some point, you'll realize you're making so much money on the side that you can do what needs to happen. That's my personal, but there are a lot of different ways to approach it. Why don't you talk, Gary?
Yeah, I'd also look for some advice from someone in the industry. If you're looking to get into the cleaning service, maybe finding someone that's in the industry. There's an organization out there called SCORE, score.org, that has retired people from all walks of different industries who can provide free advice on how to get into the business that you want to get into. There's also New York, the NYBDSC. I may have those initials incorrectly, but it's an organization in the SUNY schools that can provide you free assistance with business development. So those are the ways to kind of ease into it without having to shell out money up front, and then realizing that you don't like what you're getting into. So that would be my recommendation.
I would say second is that, okay, if you want to get into this, I assume you have do you have some knowledge, hopefully of the industry, but then cost it out, do that business plan. So you say, okay, I want to start small. How much are you going to are you going to do it all yourself, or are you going to hire people? If you're going to hire people, how much are you going to have to pay them? What are your costs involved with that?
Right.
What are your payroll taxes going to be? I would also caution against using people and paying them off the books. A lot of people, especially businesses that start out, say, you know what? I'm just going to pay them off who's going to know? The government does find out in a lot of instances, not every instance, but in a lot. And if they find out, the penalties are so severe, it is extremely hard to recover from that.
It's also hard to grow from there. That's like people who don't want to show profit on a tax return.
Right.
It's like, but try to go to the bank 5 years later and ask for funding, even though you had the ability.
But think about how you want to structure your business, and then you have to cost it out. That's the thing. And then, okay, how much is it going to cost me? And then say, well, how much can I charge? You need to do a little research and find out how much are people charging. In what areas do you think you can get in? You know, if you're doing housekeeping, obviously you'd want to go to, the more affluent areas, try to network into that, because they're going to pay more. So for things like that. So that's, that again goes to the business plan. And that's the most basic thing. Figure that out, or find someone who's done it and find out what their business plan is, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. But you need to understand how to run the business. If you go into a business and you do not understand the business, it will fail. Doesn't matter how smart you are. It's very hard to learn on the fly and on some things that aren't intuitive.
Okay, so what I want to add is that, so for cleaning business, I would say don't start the business unless you've done the cleaning yourself for a few months. You will learn so much from those few months. You will know, hey, 1,000 square foot apartment, it takes 3 hours. So if I'm sending an employee, why is it taking them 6 hours? Like, how am I going to price this? So if you do the job for a couple of months, you will learn every little detail, where there's going to be theft, where there's going to be problems, so you can plan and budget better. And then when you hire people, okay, they're taking 15 extra minutes, okay, that's not so much. But if somebody's taking 2 hours more, they're eating up your profit. So side hustles are great, but your main hustle is always going to be better. So do something that you know and keep control. Don't do anything where if you hire somebody and that person walks away, your whole investment's gone.
Yeah.
You got to be like, okay, if the cleaner doesn't show up, I can quickly go over there, do the job so I don't lose the client. So control, control, control. That's what I always tell people.
And also leverage the power of social media, which for most organic is free, right? So if you know you're looking to start a business cleaning houses, pick 5 of what I would do is 5 of the most affluent areas in Westchester, right? Because you don't want to have clients that are going to struggle to pay you. Right.
It will be commercial.
Oh, so if it's commercial, then what cities, towns, where do you want to be, right? And start offering services on the free social platforms, the Facebook groups, do some Instagram. You can do it pretty cheap, near free, except for your time, and start gauging interest that way. And I think that that'll kind of help you as you're game planning, those first steps, and it's free.
Oh, and your competition can also be your friend if you find the right people. So if you find another competitive business, they might not cover an area, so if they get a customer, they'll send it your way. You might not cover an area they do. So find the right business that's your competitor, and they could be a good source of business back and forth.
That's a great point. Charlene?
I have a question, well, questions I'll just give to the panelists. Gary, as a small business owner, I've been in business for, let's say, 6 months. I've done the legwork of creating a business plan. So I guess my next steps would be maybe run it by Doug to see how it is, if I've covered all my bases, and then come to you. You're the banker. Okay, and now I'm ready for a loan. I want a loan. You're giving us a lot of resources to go to, but I want to know if I come to Tompkins. Okay, so here I am with my wallet full of receipts or whatever, my taxes. What would Tompkins say when they look at me? What are they looking at? In order to say, hey, we can give you a loan?
Sure. With only 6 months worth of history, I thank you very much for the opportunity, first of all. Glad that I know you. Would absolutely look for that strong business plan, the financial projections for at least 2 years. Look to see what type of personal equity you have. And then I'd probably partner with a community development financial institution, and there's a few of them out there, like Community Capital, where they provide small business loans for businesses that are just starting up. The bank typically looks for at least 2 years of solid financial history before we would do any type of lending without partnering with that community development financial institution or the SBA.
Okay, I have been in business for 2 years and 6 months.
Perfect.
What do you need
Yeah,
from me?
let's take a look at those 2 years worth of tax returns. We know probably the first year it's going to be a little rocky, but you never know. Take a look at the both years' tax returns. We would look at your accounts receivables, your accounts agings, payables. We take a look to see if there's any existing debt out there. We want to know what those payments are. And then we do the cash flow analysis or study to see if you can afford this debt. It's a little weird on the banking side for small business because we're not looking at you as if we were looking at someone coming in for a personal loan. When you come in to look for when you come to the bank for a personal loan, we're looking at your W-2s, if you have W-2s, and that's we know what your income is, we know what your expenses are, and we know how much net money you make afterwards. So it's kind of easy to calculate how to make a loan to you. But on the small business side, we're actually looking in the past to see if we can give you money in the future. It's the weirdest thing. So we're looking 2 years back to see if you're managing all of those receivables that you come in, that you're showing a net profit, that you have control over your expenses, to make sure that you have enough net operating income to support the debt that we want to give you. And of course, I know that you have done that, and we'd be more than happy to give you a loan.
Let me ask you something, Gary, just as a follow-up to that. I don't know what percentage of your base customers are people of color, multicultural chamber. I have to ask, do you find that there are hang-ups, things brown, black communities need to know that maybe they're not, when they come into the bank, do you see anything that's, I know everybody's different,
Yeah.
but are there any things that,
No, that's a really good question. We do have a good mix in being in Westchester, so I'm not seeing one over another. If they are in business for at least 2 years, they've paid their dues, and they're pretty much ready to rock and roll. I will admit that there is a lot of programs or advantages that they can take advantage of to make themselves a little bit more
attractive?
for a bank. Thank you very much for doing that.
You got it?
Empire State has a program right now called the Bridge to Success, where if you're a registered women or minority-owned business and you've gone through their program, they're offering guarantees on certain types of loans, and we are a bank that participates in that program. So that's something that you can take a look at for additional resources for money.
Okay.
I just want to add something to that. What I tell my clients, if you're going to need a loan 2 or 3 years from now, go meet the loan officer now, tell them what their requirements are, and put that into your budget. Like I've had instances, somebody's car renewal was coming up. I told them, okay, you need a loan in 3 months. Don't renew the car. Let's get rid of that payment. Once you get the loan, get it then. Just take the subway for 2 months. It's fine. So speak to them, and you can put that in your plan, and you'll be in a much better position 2 years from now.
And just a final point on that, which not everybody has available, but a lot of times if you have a guarantor of the loan, a bank will be much more likely to lend you money if that person, or whether you personally have other assets that you're willing to risk, that changes the equation. So that's always something to consider as well.
Okay, so I'm going to continue my scenario, all right? So Gary has decided that I'm going to get this loan, all right? And it's, what's the length of the time to pay back the loan, Gary?
Is it a line of credit or is it a term loan? It could be up to 5 years if it's a term loan. If it's a line of credit, it's usually 2 years.
Okay, we're doing a line of credit. We're doing a line of credit. So we've gotten this money. We're feeling really good about ourselves. We originally went to Doug, right, to show him what our goals are, and Doug, we made some changes and forgot to tell Doug. All right? Now it's tax time. We go to Naeem, we did our taxes, and now we're being audited. Something is awry, or whatever the word is. Naeem, can you help me? If the Uncle Sam is telling me I don't have all my ducks in a row, can you help me if the Uncle Sam is telling me that I owe them a significant amount of money because I did not report certain things correctly?
Yes, so if you get a letter from Uncle Sam, New York State, I would review your tax return. I would see what the discrepancies are, and then I would ask you, is this true or not? Where's the discrepancy? A lot of the times, it's not, they have a discrepancy on their side, and we just have to explain it. And, it's like you reported income on the wrong line, and they have a different form, so we just got to tell them it's on the wrong line, So, yeah, I sit down, I request your source documents, I look at the tax return, and I look at the notice they send, and sometimes they just send you a notice without asking for anything to say, oh, we want to audit this year. So then I call the agent, and I say, hey, what are you looking for? Tell me so I can get that over to you, And some agents are like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Some are like, you have to send me and then I'll tell you. So it's case by case, I would say. Okay.
I was just going to say, but that's why it's important to pick the right type of entity that you're doing business as, and that will determine a lot of things and have tax consequences.
Yeah, so one of the things you would suggest is being registered correctly, registered under the correct NCIS setting, which is the federal number. So if I'm understanding this correctly, when I'm starting a business or I have a small business, make sure that federal ID number is correct. And if I pivot into another business, I have to redo the registration?
Well, if you're forming a new business and it's a new entity, then the answer is yes. If you're just doing a new business through the same entity, then the answer is no. I mean, it depends how you set things up. So a corporation or an LLC is an entity. It's like a person. So just like you have a social security number, the entities have EINs, employer identification numbers. That's like their social security number. So any business you do through that entity, you need to report. So if you're doing a new business, you have to decide, do I want to do it under the original business or under a new business, new entity? If it's a new entity, then you do need a new EIN. Yes?
So it's possible to, I don't need that, Mom. So it's possible to have multiple businesses under one LLC or entity?
Absolutely. That's why a lot of businesses have DBA, or in New York, it's assumed names. So you can call yourself different things, but it would be, commercial cleaners, right? It could be ABC Corp. doing business as commercial cleaners, ABC Corp. doing business as media consultants.
Sure. So what's the benefit to doing that as opposed to just starting an entirely new entity?
It's costs.
Got
It's
it.
As one entity, you have one tax return. Everything's funneled through. It's economy of scale. However, a lot of times you want differentiation, and a lot of times, if you do it through the same entity, if one business goes down, they both go down. So the reason why you would separate them, and it's no different than when people buy real estate. A lot of times, each piece of real estate they buy under a new corporate entity. Because should something happen with that one piece of real estate, it doesn't affect all the other holdings. That goes down, and they're fine. If you combine everything, like you have one entity own all this real estate, if one building's foreclosed, they can come after all your other buildings. So, and that goes for businesses as well.
Okay. And I have another question. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Can I just say, a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll form a new business, but it's a wholly owned subsidiary. So it's just a level.
So I know that there are a couple of states, I think it's Wyoming and Delaware, where people tend to, why are you?
I hate that one.
So you know what I'm gonna ask. Yeah. So I know I guess the main reason is because I guess it's more cost effective, but it seems shady to me going that route. So is it shady?
Okay, so let me explain. And the reason I laugh is because it goes along with when you start a business, consult with the experts. I've had a lot of clients come in and they say, I have a Delaware corporation. Yeah, because I could do it myself. I didn't really need you for that. And I say, okay, why did you form in Delaware? And they're going, because that's where corporations form. Smart people do. I know that. Everybody knows that. All the big companies, that's where they form. So the answer to your question is, Delaware has been around really long time. Their body of law is very well established, and there are certain benefits when it comes to shareholder rights. So if you're a minority owner, majority owner, and that's why very large corporations or entities incorporate there. There's also certain things I'm not going to get into with intellectual property rights. If you're a holding company, there are tax benefits. So there are benefits in Delaware. However, having said that, if you are doing business in New York and you are a Delaware corporation or LLC, you need to be authorized to do business in New York. What that means is you almost need to incorporate again. It's called being authorized to do business, but it's just as expensive as forming a new entity. So you have double your fees, because you now have to pay Delaware every year for their fees, franchise fees, and you're paying New York. So it makes no sense unless you need those few benefits that Delaware gives you. But there are benefits for very large corporations to doing business there.
And now I'm sorry, I'm being such a hog right now.
So you mentioned holding companies. Can
Correct.
you talk more about that? Because I've worked for a couple of companies and I've had to do some paperwork for RFPs and things like that where I would have to list the holding company and then the LLC and.
Okay, so what happens usually when you have a holding company really is a company that owns other companies. So right now I have a client who's a franchisee. They have a lot of franchises. So they've come to me. They're not that sophisticated. They were out west. They're starting to do business here. And they're entering into leases. And I said, you can't enter into a lease with one company. So we formed a holding company, which will be the original owners. And that company will own all these other entities that are going to form the franchises. So each restaurant that they have is going to be owned by a separate company. And that company's owner will be the holding company. And that protects the holding company in terms of liability, but even more so, it allows investors to come in who would invest in the holding company, and therefore it's much more attractive than investing in a single entity, which can rise or fall. And companies do that for a variety. So that is the basic thing. It's a hub and spoke. So the hub is the holding company, and that owns all these other entities, and it could be franchises. It could just be different industries, different types of companies. But it's an investment vehicle. Number one, it serves as an investment vehicle, and it isolates you from liability.
I just want to add something. If you live in New York and your business is going to be in New York, incorporate in New York. Don't do this extra $500-600 to Delaware. Just give it to me. I'll take it for free.
I would take that as well. I'll split it with you. That was an excellent question, though, and I laughed because you would not know how many people come in telling me they formed in Delaware because they don't need attorneys. They did it on whatever the Zoom is, you know.
I definitely did not do that. But my question is, if you are doing business in other states, but you are incorporated in New York, I'm always confused around the tax liabilities that's owed to, especially for me, I'm a service base and also I act as a reseller. So I get very confused as to, this is probably more so for you, and maybe for you as well, of how does that look legally and in terms of just managing that?
I'm just going to handle this very quickly from the legal end because it really is a tax issue. But from a legal end, all states have different standards for what's called a tax nexus. And a tax nexus means you're going to owe them taxes. So it's really on a case-by-case basis depending on what states you're in. But even very large corporations get confused, and I had one client, they had to pay for a very expensive national analysis of all the states they do business in to figure out where they should be filing tax returns. And with that, I'll throw it to the
Yes,
tax
so
expert.
it's case by case, depending on which state and which city you're doing it. The Wayfair, I think South Dakota or something, they made that. So I think the average rule right now is that if you are shipping products to most states, it's $100,000 in gross revenue or 100 to 200 transactions. Once you cross those lines, then you have to register your business, collect sales tax, and then you will file the corporate tax there too. If you have an employee, even if it's a remote employee in a different state, automatically most states register and start reporting and filing sales tax and corporate taxes. So it's case by case, and California is the worst. They have so many sales tax jurisdictions, and you got to figure out which one it is. I think Alavera is a software that tells you the sales tax thing, but it's very complicated, and you got to look at each one separately.
So we are nearing the conclusion of our meeting today. I wanted to take a moment. I'm going to kick it over to our last question. Of course.
It is very often discussed that being a Latino, being a person of color, of being a single mother, being a female single mother are benefits for you to actually start a business. What can you tell us about that information that is always out there?
Well, there are certain programs which benefit women-owned businesses. I mean, you need to look into various programs because they're both on the federal and state level. And I don't really do that much, so it's not really illegal. It's more of almost a tax issue.
Okay, so I get this question often, especially in New York City. A lot of people will go and get like a minority owner. I work with New York City, trying to get even a dime out of them, you're going to spend $1, okay? So you have to be doing something really big to get money to make it worth your while. Like New York City will give you a $5,000 grant, but you'll spend about $3,000 on the preparation and application process. So if that's the only reason you're doing it for, to get these programs, then it's probably not a good business plan, you know?
I have to tell you, Copy and Art is a minority-owned certified business entity, which makes us eligible for certain federal contracts. It is typically a race to the bottom, and you basically have to lower your prices so much so that you can barely make a profit. That's our experience over these 11 years. However, it did benefit us to get certified. It adds a little bit of credibility with certain corporate clients that we have. In certain cases, like our work with Johnson & Johnson, they'll pay us faster. So instead of making us wait 90 days on term, they'll pay us net 15 because we're a woman and a minority. Okay. I'll take it. I would honestly say that, and even the certification process we had to go through was a binder, and it was hundreds of dollars at that time early on in the business. I would say, except for the payment terms that large corporate clients will give us, the RFPs that we've gone after from a government perspective have really amounted to, if you're willing to win on price, which for the record, Copy and Art is, we're not going to win on price. If you're willing to win on price, it might work for you. So like if you can discount all the way down, and your business allows you to be the lowest price bidder, it might be good for you. In our case, that was not something we were willing to do. And so it was more, just because we could get certified and put that on our site. And
thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that there is such a deceiving information out there. It's so thrown all the time around, and I like it. Just what you just information that you share just completely blow my mind away, because it is so push and push and push, and in reality then there's not really that significant benefit to it. So
we made a decision immediately that we were going to win because we were better.
Amen.
And so if we could just continue with that corporate philosophy, and we didn't have to worry about, I was interviewed by 914 last month, and I told her, I said, you're interviewing me because it's a diversity issue. No offense, and I'm brown, and that's cool, and I'll take it, but that's not the most interesting part about me or Copy and Art. And so in America, like if there's a card and you want to play it and you can play it, great. I would say corporate excellence, heart for your business, grind, hustle, like that's what worked for me. And so that's what I would push out. And I think that nears the conclusion, Charlene.
Yes. Wow, this was actually really, really amazing and very informative. And we can go on for the rest of the day. I was not even aware that the time just flew by. As you can see, we do have access to a lot of information here at the Westchester Multicultural Chamber. Please use us, ask us questions, and we'll point you in the right direction. The goal is to build businesses and sustain businesses, grow businesses here in Westchester County. Thank you to our panelists, and I have to say, Naeem came all the way from New Jersey.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And I can tell you this, Naeem is one of the best you will ever find when it comes to your taxes. Seriously, and I'm not just saying that because he's a friend. I have worked with Naeem on a networking level, and I've heard some of the stories regarding some of the tax filings and liabilities, and people just in a really bad place. And when they're at the tail's end, they come to Naeem, and he fixes it. There's no shortcut. There's no shortcuts when it comes to taxes. Doug, I have only heard great things about you. So I look forward to working with you. And I believe you're as good as they say you are.
He is.
So everyone take Doug's card here, okay? Make sure your ducks are in a row. And what's his name again?
He's like, I'm waiting.
Gary.
I'm waiting.
Gary Solomon, Tompkins Bank. And I'll say, when I first thought about doing this chamber, a friend of mine told me I should do it, and I was like, okay, I don't know. He said, no, you should do the African American Chamber, reignite it. And I'm like, it's a good idea to do a chamber, but I don't want to isolate myself into, one, because I'm multicultural, right? So I called my twin brother. I bet a lot of you didn't know I had a twin brother, right? You all didn't know, right? I do. Rob, why don't you stand up? I called Rob, and Rob said to me, I'm white, right? So I was like, yeah, but we're multicultural. Everyone is included. That's what multiculturalism is. It's an inclusion of all, not just race, color, and creed, but it's about thought and where you live, it's about everything, and we keep narrowing diversity and multiculturalism to brown and black. Okay, the issues with brown and black is they're laughing at me. I pronounced the word incorrectly.
What does this have to do with Gary?
Oh,
Gary's like, I'm still waiting. I'm waiting.
I'll get to you, Gary.
Poor Gary. Jeez, Gary.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Okay. I am going to talk about how great Gary is. Okay, so Gary, the second call I made was to Tompkins to support me on this venture. And without hesitation, Tompkins said, we're in. We believe in this. It is necessary. Inclusion needs to start happening, and we will be there with you neck and neck. Thank you, Tompkins. Gary.
Yeah.
We took the scenic route. Oh, sorry. And so thank you all. And Elena, oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
No,
I'm
the
long-winded.
panel. This is about the panel. It was a pleasure to be here and to sponsor.
It's a pleasure.
Seriously.
It was, but no, Elena, we couldn't do this without you either. And same thing goes. When I spoke to Elena, after we launched and everything, Elena said, we're in. I got you. And that's what it's about. That's what networking is about. It's about developing these relationships when you don't have all the financial backing and stuff, that you have the relationship already, that someone can say, I got you. Give me a call. I'll help you where I can. So thank you for joining us this morning. We look forward to seeing you again. Please check our events. We have Cash Flow is King coming up, and that will be with Gary. So we'll post it. Please, thank you all. Bye-bye.